The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Well, and let's exchange. What is, and again, it's called best guessing because there is no evidence, there is no truth. I think when the heat got so hot that Obama and his minions dropped that birth certificate, which is a layered birth certificate. I mean, any reasonable person would say, let's see the original copy. What Barack Obama did is he sent this woman attorney. She flew the night flight and comes back with a PDF file. And on that PDF file, it says father's race, African, which is a huge mistake. And, of course, the media, I remember at the time, Mike Litwin, the columnist, and all these people, see, at last the truth. And I come back to these things, and I go, how could this at last be the truth? You can't find another birth certificate on that island that proclaims a father or a mother's race or a child's race as African. Africa, you know, there's Anwar Sadat, and there is Nelson Mandela. Both of them are Africans on the continent, but they're years apart. They're so different racially. One's a Semite and one's a Negro. And so, but they claim African, which is the politically correct way, as we always say, Jimmy down the hall when he invents that birth certificate. But Dr. Corsi, pick it up from there. What do you think the truth is?
Well, I think, Peter, the truth is almost impossible at this point to really ascertain. I mean, the more and more I look at Obama's background, I'm convinced that there's intervention of the intelligence agency, CIA. I mean, we know that John Brennan, who's currently the head of the CIA, his intelligence agency in 2008, before Obama was president and before Brennan was head of the CIA, broke in and sanitized Barack Obama's passport records. That was even reported in the New York Times. I wrote about it extensively. So there's been CIA intervention in sanitizing and protecting Barack Obama's background. I think that's clear. The true story, if I look at the few documents we can get, in 1961, when Barack Obama was born, the Immigration and Naturalization Service in Hawaii was looking at the case very extensively, and the file says that the INS people doubted that Barack Obama Sr. and Ann Dunham were married because they weren't living together. They couldn't find any common address. They didn't believe this was Barack Obama's child. They said that if Ann Dunham and Barack Obama Sr. used that they had a child as a reason to extend Barack Obama's visa stay in the United States, the Immigration and Naturalization Service puts in the file they will contest it because they think this is a ruse that many immigrants have used over the years to marry a U.S. citizen and claim to have a child or to actually have a child. In this case, the INS didn't think it was his child. Now, if it wasn't Barack Obama Sr.'s child, he was just picked as the convenient father. And, in the history of Barack Obama Sr., he only sees the son one time after he leaves Hawaii. There's not much attachment here between the Kenyan Barack Obama and the son, Barack Obama. It's easy to believe that he wasn't the father. But then again, Barack Obama Sr. was a polygamist, and he had children all over the place whom he seems to have regularly abandoned, who are popping up now writing books. At any rate, I think the history, if we could ever decipher it, there's some mystery here, some birth mystery as to who Barack Obama was really born to. And it's going to be complex to sort it out because very quickly after he's born, Ann Dunham leaves and goes to Seattle, does not stay in Hawaii, takes the baby with her. Then they end up next in Indonesia with another stepfather. And there's, all kinds of intrigue about whether the Indonesians were first involved in giving birth to this child, whether the father might have been Indonesian. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not sure Barack Obama Sr. or Barack Obama himself, knows the truth. I don't know of anyone here, because these kind of family lies, when something is being covered up in a family, it's very, very difficult to go back and discern the truth. And all that I can tell you is the documents we have, Peter, indicate that the stories Barack Obama has told about who he is, including that the Kenyan might be his father, do not bear out in the documentary record.
There's no way. And in fact, I believe it was your work when we found the University of Washington, the babysitters where they lived.
Found the babysitter. I interviewed the babysitter. I found the address where Ann Dunham had rented an apartment to go to the university. I worked with the university. We determined these were night classes. They were not extension classes. We got her actual grade records. We had the universities go through the entire examination. So, Peter, it's pretty clear that Ann Dunham left Hawaii. And, of course, in Barack Obama's autobiography, he says that the little family stayed together in Hawaii. Even Abercrombie, the former governor, came out and lied and said that he saw the family at birth. And then he had to go back and say, no, he wasn't really in the hospital. He later admitted that.
He saw them socially at events.
Yeah, that's what he said later.
Yeah, well, of course, he's lying.
He's lying.
Yeah, but...
And, Peter, that's the problem with figuring out who Barack Obama is, that every aspect, it's not just the birth, but it's the schools. We still don't have the school records. It's the people he associated with. We don't know every country Barack Obama has traveled to. We don't have his passport records. We don't have his grades. We don't know if he really attended 2 years at Columbia, or how he got to Columbia, or how he got into Harvard, and what grades he got at Harvard, or what he studied at Harvard.
And the strange pictures that show up that have been photoshopped by his own campaign.
Yeah, and also, unanswered things that don't fit together, where, Barack Obama is basically saying that he, was, involved with living here or living there and this year or that year, and you research it and you find out it isn't the case.
And this idea that he went to the airport, after even the story is well known that he didn't go to the airport with his mother to say goodbye to Daddy. He never did it, yet sitting with little school kids in this country, he tells that story.
Right, and, there are pictures of Barack Obama supposedly in school with school friends in Hawaii in years when we know he was supposed to have been in Indonesia. Mm-hmm. And these kinds of, the record of Obama's life, when it's looked at critically, and you say, okay, now I've heard the story, get me documents to prove this. For most people, you can do it. For most people, obtaining a birth certificate is something you do to get your kids in Little League, to get your kid admitted to an elementary school. It's not something that you have to go through this years-long fight over, and then you don't get original records. You get, if Hawaii had original records, why didn't they just immediately release them? And then the more I researched Hawaii, I found Hawaii was issuing passports to people, or birth certificates to people they knew weren't born in Hawaii.
Remember we found out Shanghai Shek had one.
Shanghai Shek.
That's amazing.
Yes, and also there's a whole series of issued birth certificates, especially during the pre-World War II years when the Japanese born in Hawaii were trying to be forced to go back to fight for the Japanese in World War II. Yep. And Japan, if you couldn't produce a Hawaii birth certificate, Japan was going to come and get you or get your relatives in Japan and punish them. So there was a major effort to get issued birth certificates for people who did not get born in Hawaii, especially the Japanese in this period. It carried over. I documented even in legislation in Hawaii passing laws making it easy for people to claim children were born in Hawaii that were not born in Hawaii in order to make them citizens, in order to make them part of their family. And Hawaii has had very peculiar laws on this, which we've fully documented. It would be very easy for the family to have registered Barack Obama's birth in Hawaii and an outlying Department of Health office and the hospital where he's supposed to have been born, Kapiolani. They changed the hospital. First he was supposed to have been born at Queens, and then the family said no, Kapiolani. Kapiolani has never produced any records that Ann Dunham was ever a patient. And the people I've talked to extensively in Hawaii, I've spent a lot of time in Hawaii on this, will not go on the record, but they'll tell you the administrators that met in the hospitals, they don't have records of Obama being born in Hawaii, except for this computer-generated version that was released in the White House on April 27, 2011. And, Sheriff Arpaio has pointed out it's got major problems to it as a document. There's problems with Obama's Social Security number, which will not E-Verify, and over the past week or so when he was enrolled in healthcare.gov, it appears the Social Security number was a problem again, because the White House had to admit they couldn't enroll Obama in healthcare.gov unless they did it in person and bypassed a lot of systems on the claim that he was the president. Well, the only thing that's required to register for healthcare.gov is your Social Security number. And Barack Obama's Social Security number, the Social Security Administration, we have records, say was not issued to Barack Obama.
That's right. Yeah.
So these are kind of discrepancies and problems that are going to dog Obama historically. You know, if they don't get resolved now,
you say that
there's certainly going to be continuing fascination to historians, and Obama's, you know, remember that no president's legacy is set until after they leave. This presidency could easily be viewed as like a Jimmy Carter failed presidency, and these are some of the problems heading with Obamacare and other issues going on. A failed presidency ends up inevitably producing a revisionist examination of who the man was and why the person was ever elected president in the first place.
I want to ask a question. I'm going to set a question up, take a break, and come back with you. Why, other than yourself and a handful of very, very brave people, nobody goes near this story? Dr. Jerry Corsi is our guest. You can see the picture of Barack Obama's latest half-brother who is disputing his book, Dreams. It's up 710. Our website has this man's picture, and it works right with Dr. Jerry Corsi, of course, the man who has been on the trail of who, in fact, is Barack Obama, with books, investigations, and travel, and yet another Obama relative has surfaced, and as Jerry says, to cause the president grief over the credibility of the story he has recounted in his autobiography, Dreams from My Father. Cascio and others obviously believe that Ayers wrote his book, and he even played down his knowledge of Ayers until that blew up in his face. He was just some guy from the neighborhood, and their kids went to school together, and that was taken apart. And Jerry's trying to construct a very iffy who or what is Barack Obama. And there are these different people that show up in his life, and they're there for a reasonable amount of time. They heavily influence him, and yet he never speaks about them, and he kind of drives on. And I think if it were said and done, there's many, many people who believe he has a totally separate biological father than Barack Obama. What do you do with that?
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.